Welcome, everyone, to Voices of NCAJ, the podcast for the North Carolina Advocates for Justice. I am Amber Nimocks, your host and Director of External Affairs for NCAJ. Before we get started, I'd like to thank today's episode sponsor, Advocate Capital. Advocate is passionate about helping plaintiffs' attorneys get better results for their clients, mainly through their AdvoTrack case expense funding service. It allows firms to track case expenses and recover borrowing costs, which makes the net cost of borrowing zero on cases they win. Learn more at advocatecapital.com. I am so excited to welcome today's guest, Brian Carter. Brian is a best-selling author and IBM futurist you may have seen on Bloomberg TV. And if you have registered to attend the return of NCAJ's signature fall event, Mountain Magic, you will see him there. Brian will be delivering a keynote titled A Human Approach to AI-Enhanced Litigation and Mediation on Friday, October 4th at noon. If you have not registered for Mountain Magic, which runs October 3rd through 6th at the Omni Grove Park Inn in Asheville, go right now to ncaj.com/mountain-magic to register. So Brian has 25 years of business success that guide both the Carter Group and Optimedia, which provide AI programming, strategy, consulting, and marketing. Brian and his team have worked with companies of all sizes, including Microsoft, Humana, JP Morgan, the National Academy of Sciences, and the U.S. Army. He's taught over 150,000 students, has more than 500,000 online fans, and is a former professional stand-up comedian. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Amber. Excited to be here and excited about the conference.
We are too. We are so excited. As you know, we are bringing this event back after a too long hiatus, and we are so excited about the programming that you are a part of, our AI Centered Friday programming. So we are the legal industry, legal profession, as every other sector is, sort of sitting here on the edge of AI, wondering how to approach it, how to keep from being devoured by it. And you have a particular approach to that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, my first reaction is, jump in, I don't know what kind of devouring is going to happen. Is that like a fear of AI taking over, or is it just like overwhelm?
I think in general it's just a fear of the unknown, just because it's a great big new thing. I've had some folks, practice management people, describe it as, we're sort of where we were with the internet. The legal profession has traditionally been very slow to adapt to change. And legal practices, legal firms that were able to figure out how to use the internet in their practices in an ethical and powerful and empowering way were far ahead of the curve. I mean, the folks who figured that out, I guess, in the early 90s, they were few and far between, but they were really leaders. And here we stand at a similar sort of precipice, I think. So I'm wondering, before we get into like how we're gonna ride this wave, tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get to be who you are and what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm an odd bird. I was a liberal arts guy with a lot of interests, a lot of different talents, and it turns out I'm just like a lifelong learner. I love growth, and I've gone through a lot of different things. I wanted to be a rock star early on. I was programming. I went to computer camp. Then I went to acupuncture school. I got a master's degree. I taught medical terminology to medical master's students. I blogged a ton, written books, did SEO, did Google ads. I've started 5 or 10 businesses, depending on how you count it. Got into stand-up comedy, podcasting, etc. So I finally got into keynote speaking because I met a guy who was also a former comedian who had gotten into that, and he was like, "I think you could do this. You have the expertise and you have the comedy." So, over time, because of all my interests, really marketing, communication, and keynote speaking have been the things that make sense because anything I learn, whether it's AI or whatever, I can bring into those domains.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had some early success with social media. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, so going back to like 99, I was one of the first people to do like SEO and Google ads in 2004 and then social media around 2008. So I was always, interacting with the leaders of those movements and kind of moved on, eventually took what I learned and integrated it into other things. But yeah, I wrote several books about Facebook. That's what got me onto TV, talking about Facebook and all the developments there. That's we've had these waves of change. We had an industrial revolution, we had the internet, we had social media, we got AI now. I've left out a few, but I always get fascinated with these new things. What is the opportunity? How are we going to integrate this in business? What can we actually do practically to benefit from it?
So we had a very similar sort of attitude, I think, towards social media. I remember, and this is from the point of view of politics, not really from the point of view of the legal profession, but in 2008, it particularly related to the Obama campaign, and Facebook was the great uniter, and it really seemed to be a way to unite the world and live up to the promise of its potential that it was presented at. And I think most people would argue that we have definitely seen that kind of turn itself inside out, in terms of the malevolent potential of social media. Something that started out with great promise and has proved to be uh, problematic. Are there what lessons did we learn there, you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think with anything that's powerful, it's going to have an effect. It's going to have good and bad and neutral effects, right? So, I mean, yeah, obviously Obama was able to use the power of that in a way that people hadn't really used it before, and that was great for him. And I think social media has been a positive for a lot of people in a lot of ways. For you to explore your interests and stuff. It's not good at discovery. It separates people because we just get deeper and deeper into what we already are interested in, what we believe, and we don't experience like when there were only three TV channels, you heard about stuff that you won't hear about now, right? Because they kind of fed it to us, right? So now all of these recommendation systems, and it is AI, it's machine learning, they will recommend to you more stuff like I just watched, my wife and I just watched Roadhouse, and all now it's just recommending violent stuff, and I'm like, I have more interest in that. So it's like it kind of will pigeonhole you when it's failing, and I think that unfortunately social media has isolated us and separated us in some ways. But again, it's had many other benefits. It's brought together people who were geographically alone in whatever it is they deal with. Like for example, I have this condition called misophonia where I'm sensitive to certain sounds, and I can talk to all these people. I've never talked to anybody in person who's had it, but I've talked on Reddit to like hundreds of people who have it. So it has good and bad effects, and I think AI is going to be the same way. It's gonna it's gonna change the way we work. It's going to empower some people. It's also going to confront other people with kind of the limitations of their approach. It's going to change the ground, the market, and everything. And it's like anything else, we have to adapt. And, it's not, you guys aren't the only industry that says that you tend to be slow to adopt new things, right? A lot of people talk that way. Um, and that's fine. But I do think that it seems like the pace of change has increased. So things are changing and they're changing faster. And where you could take 5 or 10 years to adopt the internet back then, social media, if you weren't adopting it in a few years, you lost a big advantage, right? And with AI, I just there's two approaches to the world, right? One is like we're gonna just jump forward in the future. The other is like, hang on, let's wait, let's see, you know. Two, and we need both because we'll balance each other out. But I am I'm one of the jump in people, like if this thing could be a huge advantage for my business, then I want to find out how and start doing that right away. One of the things I'll talk about in my talk is the adoption curve, where maybe the innovators spend a lot of time and money on stuff that never works out. Maybe that's not smart for the average law practice, right? Then you got early adopters, and then you got early majority. That's where it's like, okay, well, now we know this thing's really going to be powerful. Now is the time to adopt it, so we have an advantage. Then you got late adopters who they're like, oh, I guess. And then they've already lost an advantage to a whole bunch of other competitors, right? Not to mention, and this for you guys, like the insurance companies are way ahead on this stuff, right? So now is the time to catch up. And then the
Yeah.
final stage, yeah,
Uh-huh.
go ahead.
Talk a little bit more about that because that was interesting. We had a conversation earlier about the how the insurance companies are using this, particularly in our personal injury practitioners are going to start experiencing this if they haven't already.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, again, this is not my field, so if I misspeak on some of the legal stuff, forgive me. But I know in a general way that the insurance companies have a lot of data. They have that data all together, and as long as they use it within like legal limits and ethically, they're going to be able to. They're going to know more. They're going to have more information, like how much should we settle this case for with these specific parameters. They're going to be able to use machine learning systems, which are really just huge data analyzers,
Hmm.
right?
And
To create advantages for them, right?
right, and because they have massive amounts of information about settlement amounts that they can put
Right.
together.
Which is information that you guys may or may not have, right? And so one of the things we talked about that's a real opportunity, but there are some issues with this that are really going to be human issues, okay? Which is if your industry or niche pulls all your data together and shares it, you create an advantage. You have a common enemy, and so you have this advantage together if you use it. But if like fear of other law practices keeps people from doing something like that, you have a major disadvantage against these insurance companies.
Right. So that kind of leads me to one of the questions that you offered for audiences who are going to be at Mountain Magic to think about is what are the uniquely human things that your firm does in your legal practice that AI won't replace anytime soon?
Yeah, that's where we have to think like what, and I'll go into this in the talk, but and we talk about it a little bit here, but what things are these AI systems good at, and what are they bad at? And then what are humans good at that AI is having trouble with? And without going too specifically into, there's a lot of different types of AI, from machine learning to deep learning to these large language models like ChatGPT and other things. There's a whole bunch of different things and tools. But when when you try to get an LLM like ChatGPT to do certain things, it fails, right? It's number one, it's really good at predicting what words and sentences go together. Like it's built basically on this probabilistic statistical sense of what things are similar, what things go together, and what things are not, right? One thing that means is that if you number one, if it has the training data, you can ask it a lot of questions where it can fill in the blanks for you very quickly, right? The problem is if something's not in the data, it can't do it, right? Like if there's a whole bunch of legal case, and the law is very, very complicated, right? It's very, very specific cases. If it's this, it's that. If it's that, it's that. Blah, blah, blah. So there's a whole bunch of specific things that, frankly, even if you took all that and fine tune a legal chat GPT, is still not going to be the best. what's needed there is what's called a knowledge graph, where you know the relationship between things, right? And there is, for example, a thing called DBpedia that has a map of 9 billion relationships between things from Wikipedia, right? So so once you have that for legal, then you've really got a complex understanding of the territory, right? So there's a famous saying that the map is not the territory, right? When you look at a map that's this big, you're not going to see features that are this big in reality, right? It's approximated. And then LLMs like ChatGPT also approximate reality and approximate the truth. That means they're going to get certain things wrong. So if you don't have a knowledge graph, or like with Perplexity, you go out and you're actually searching the internet to get more accurate, more grounded in reality information, it's just got its sort of idea of the world, which is limited, right? So to bring that back to legal, in your law practice, your experience, your education is a major advantage over what that AI type of system can do, right? It doesn't, when you ask it a question, it's only got so much context, right? It can only give you so long of an answer. And so there are all these people will put documents into these newer types of AI that are called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. So you can ask questions of your documents, right? That's another way to take your actual knowledge and use AI to get information, get questions answered quicker, right? Um, but again, these are limitations, right? So what are human limitations? Well, you can't remember all those details. So maybe you got to look it up sometimes. We can use search for that already. You can use the LLM. You can use one of these knowledge graphs, right? So that way it can help us get the information quicker than we could if we had to go to one of those old books that was, gigantic books, right? Um, but there are other things too, like human connection, right? Like an AI is nowhere. There's not even going to be a her like the movie with an AI girlfriend. There's not even going to be anything like that. That's truly believable for human connection for who knows how long. Um, the ability to read facial expressions and respond to people's, emotions in context. Those types of things are very, very human. And we basically are these gigantic computers that have all this information, and we've been in reality, multi-sensory reality, our entire lives. So we have models of reality too, just like these AIs do. And our models of reality are super complicated. We don't totally understand how we think. That's one of the funny things about creating a computer that can think. We don't really understand how all that happens. We know parts, we know like the neuron does this and that, and there are neurochemicals and blah, blah, blah. But when you just had that thought that you just had from this thing, how did that happen? Right? Oh, did it access your memory? Did it access like, did you have a visualization in your head when it happened? So you're actually seeing things, you have a sort of visual understanding of the world, and then auditory and mathematical and language. We don't know how all that happens in the human brain, right? So in a way, even and they'll also say like a human brain is a really, really efficient processing um, machine. Like the how little energy we need compared to how much computers need. So like our brains are amazing and inductive and intuitive, and we can process things better than AI can, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's like the heart, or like communication or connection, or just our ability to remember and have context and know the world, we're light years ahead of AI right now.
So we don't need to worry about being undermined by this tool. We really.
That's different. That's different. Here's the thing: the businesses make decisions on good enough and
Mm-hmm.
on profits,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So they don't necessarily need an artist or a genius to be the one that makes copies, or to be the one that answers the phone. And you'll see with customer service with big companies, they'll see what they can get away with, right? The phone tree menus with these fake computer voices, very frustrating, but what are we going to do? So they kind of get away with it. It's not optimal, but they're making financial decisions to succeed and profit, right? That's the problem. When an AI is good enough at something, somebody's job might get replaced.
But what you're saying is that when you're talking about human connections and being able to read people's emotions, which and understanding one-on-one relationships, I mean that's a big part of particularly what a lot of plaintiffs attorneys and criminal defense attorneys are doing. That's you know so the folks in our association are, that part of their practice is not going to be, they're that part. Nobody's going to come in with a, that's far off from being replaced. Like what we need to learn to do is figure out how to use this basically as a rudimentary brain to help enhance, like outsource some of our brain work to this brain.
It's a tool. I mean, there is a cost. Like we know that there's decision fatigue. Like during the day, if you have to do a certain number of things, by the end of the day, you don't have anything left. So what can we do? What can we sort of delegate or outsource to the AIs so that we preserve our best energy and best thinking power for the stuff that we're really, really good at? And that can include strategy and reasoning, which is another challenging area for LLMs. So yeah, I mean, just think about how like you have a problem and then you go to bed and you had a dream or this or that and you're in a different constant, you're at a game and all of a sudden you have this idea. Where did that come from? Like LLMs are not going to do that. AI can't do that. But so sometimes we have these innovative strategic ideas that could help you win a case. It's not just remembering what other people have done. Somebody did it first. So you'd have an idea. Boom. Humans are really good at that.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. So how would a solo or small firm get their toe in to this?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the most obvious thing is like if you haven't used something like ChatGPT or Claude for 20, 30 hours yet, you haven't jumped in the pool. Like you haven't even dipped your toes in. Yeah, Claude is like ChatGPT, but in some ways, these models are all slightly differently or different. But Claude, you can paste like 200-page documents in, and then ask it questions about it. It's pretty good at no nonsense writing. The ChatGPT ones tend to be a little more creative and weird. I think for the tone of law and the type of thinking and logic that goes on, Claude is probably a little better. Other people that are speaking at the event have said the same thing. Um, so you can use it to brainstorm. You can just talk to it. Sometimes there's no one to talk to about something. You just start chatting with the thing, and it may just help you write stuff out and think stuff out, or it may give you a good idea. Um, you can have it summarize stuff. Like again, with my keynote gigs, I'll put a whole bunch of information into Claude into a conversation, and then I'll go back and I'll say, did they say anything about when the mic check was, or did they say anything about what did it say about the audience? Maybe I need to ask more questions about the audience, right? So that way, I don't have to read all the information again. I just ask Claude what information is in there, right? And then Perplexity, which is like it's a combination of Google and ChatGPT, basically. So
Perplexity is another one of these tools.
yeah, Perplexity is like I mentioned, RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So this is basically like if you could ask ChatGPT to go search 10 different websites for an answer, which it currently doesn't do. But that's what Perplexity does. So it'll go out and maybe read like 20, 30 web pages, summarize it, and give you an answer. And I've used this for everything. The key is don't just use it for business, use it in your personal life. Like, hey, I'm going to be in this city. What should I do there? Right? Or, man, I've asked it so many questions. Oh, even cooking. Like, hey, I've got these ingredients. What should I cook tonight? Right? Give me 5 recipes, you know. So, oh yeah. Yeah, it'll be like in this and it'll say this much salt. And I was like, well, but I have kosher salt. And it's like, well, then you need 2 times as much. So like you can just, I would treat it as an assistant and go figure out their limits. Just use it for stuff that sometimes you think it won't even be able to do, and then you might be surprised. I often am. Um, so yeah, use those tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity. If you just start integrating those into your life, you're going to start to get it. Um, and just hearing about it secondhand won't do that for you, you know?
So just dive in and see how it works with what you feed it and what you need from it, and then you can
Yeah.
take it
I
from
mean,
there.
imagine the internet's new. What is it? Oh, it's a collection of computers that talk to each other, and then you got these pages, and I don't understand. Well, you got to go on it, right? Oh, I've been on the internet. That's pretty cool. Now I get it. Oh, maybe I could do this with it, right?
Right.
You got to use it.
Okay. Great. Well, Brian, we are so excited to have you guys and at in Asheville with us and to learn about all of this, which is a little bit scary, but very exciting.
Yeah,
So
I'm
we're really
excited to
looking
be
forward
there.
to it.
Cool. Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks everybody for listening to the podcast today. If you have not registered for Mountain Magic, it's at the Omni Grove Park Inn in Asheville. Go to ncaj.com/mountain-magic to register, and we will see you there.